Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova, watching the massive space station grow larger on the main screen. The Galactic Council's headquarters looked like a giant metal flower floating in space. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved around it like busy insects. "Another day, another meeting," said Dr. Lisa Harper as she walked up beside him. She carried a tablet full of notes about alien cultures and languages. Lisa knew how to talk to almost every species in the galaxy. It was her job to help humans understand their alien neighbors. "At least they're talking to us," Jake replied with his usual smile. He had been Earth's main representative for 10 years now. The aliens saw him as friendly and harmless. That was exactly what he wanted them to think. Commander Rick Barnes joined them at the front of the bridge. His uniform was clean and pressed. His weapon stayed in its holder, where it had been for the past 5 years. Rick looked like a soldier, but he acted more like a security guard. The aliens appreciated that humans kept their weapons put away. The Terra Nova docked at the station with a soft bump. Jake straightened his diplomatic uniform and checked his smile in the reflection of a dark screen. Perfect. Friendly but not too eager. Respectful but not scared. "Ready for another round of apologizing for existing?" Rick asked quietly. "Always," Jake answered. "Remember, we're the new kids here. We need to stay humble." The 3 humans walked through the station's long halls. Other species moved around them with barely a glance. The reptilian Kythera hissed softly as they passed. Their scales were dark green and their eyes were yellow. They thought humans were weak because humans rarely fought back when insulted. A group of Zephyrians buzzed past overhead. They looked like giant mantises with wings. Their leader, High Singer Vexari, had once called humans emotionally unstable in an official report. Jake had thanked her for the feedback and asked how humans could improve. Near the council chambers, they passed some Nixari representatives. These beings looked like walking crystals that hummed when they moved. They barely spoke to humans at all. To them, humans were too young and primitive to matter. The Hydrosians were different. They at least pretended to respect humans. Admiral Thexulos had tentacles instead of arms and skin that looked wet all the time. He often complimented human diplomacy, though Jake suspected he was being sarcastic. Jake entered the council chamber and took his seat at the small table marked Human Republic. The bigger, older civilizations had larger tables closer to the center. Humans sat near the back with the other minor species. "Today we discuss trade routes through the Kepler sector," announced the council president, a tall blue alien with 4 arms. "The Hydrosian Empire has requested exclusive access to develop new shipping lanes." Jake listened as the various species argued about trade rights and territory. The Kythera wanted military escort fees. The Zephyrians demanded environmental protections. The Nixari said nothing but hummed in patterns that other species somehow understood. When his turn came to speak, Jake stood and smiled. "The Human Republic appreciates being included in this discussion. We support whatever decision the Council thinks is best. We only ask that human civilian ships be allowed safe passage through any new routes." Several aliens made sounds that might have been laughter. The Kythera representative, Ambassador Ixtal, flicked his tongue dismissively. "Humans always ask for safe passage but never offer anything in return. What do your people contribute to galactic security?" "We try to contribute through peaceful cooperation," Jake replied. "And we're always willing to help with humanitarian missions." "Humanitarian?" Ambassador Ixtal repeated the word like it tasted bad. "You mean you show up after real species do the fighting and offer medical supplies?" "Medical supplies save lives," Jake said, still smiling. "We believe every life has value." This time the laughter was definitely laughter. Even Admiral Thexulos seemed amused. His tentacles wiggled in what humans had learned was the Hydrosian version of chuckling. "Very noble," the Admiral said. "Perhaps one day your species will understand that the galaxy requires strength, not just good intentions." "Perhaps," Jake agreed. "We're still learning." The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Humans were mentioned twice more, both times as examples of species that needed protection rather than species that could provide it. Jake nodded along and took notes. He thanked everyone for their wisdom and promised to consider their advice. As the meeting ended, Lisa whispered to him, "Do you ever get tired of this act?" "Every single day," Jake whispered back. "But it's working." They walked back to their ship past the same dismissive aliens. Rick's hand never moved toward his weapon, even when a young Kythera deliberately bumped into him and hissed something insulting. 50 years, Rick said once they were back on the Terra Nova. 50 years of this treatment. 50 years of learning, Jake corrected. We know their languages, their customs, their weaknesses. We know which species hate each other and which ones are allied. We know their military capabilities and their trade routes, and they know nothing about us, Lisa added. Jake looked back at the space station through the view screen. They know exactly what we want them to know. They think we're weak, peaceful, and harmless. They think we're grateful just to be included, aren't we? Rick asked. Jake's smile faded for just a moment. We're grateful for the education. Every insult teaches us something. Every dismissal gives us more information. Every time they underestimate us, they make our job easier. The Terra Nova undocked and began its journey back to human space. Jake went to his office to write his report. On paper, it would look like another routine diplomatic mission. Human representatives attended council meeting. Humans expressed gratitude for inclusion. Humans promised to consider alien advice. But Jake also made other notes in a different file. A file that tracked alien military movements, political relationships, and resource allocations. A file that had been growing for 50 years. Humans had joined the Galactic Council as students. They had learned their lessons well. Soon, Jake thought, it might be time for the final exam. But for now, they would keep smiling, keep apologizing, and keep gathering information. The galaxy thought it knew humans. It thought humans were weak and naive. Jake intended to keep it that way until the moment came to show them how wrong they were. Outside his window, the stars looked peaceful and calm, just like humans appeared to everyone else. The emergency message reached Jake Morrison at 3 a.m. ship time. His communication device buzzed with the priority signal that meant something terrible had happened. Jake sat up in his bed and answered the call. "Captain, we're getting reports from the Outer Rim," said Lieutenant Ben Clark from the bridge. "Colony worlds are going silent. No response to any communications." Jake was fully awake now. "How many colonies?" 7 so far, sir. All in the Kepler sector. I'll be right there." Jake dressed quickly and headed to the bridge. The Terra Nova was still 3 days away from human space, but they could change course. Dr. Lisa Harper was already working at her station when Jake arrived. Her screen showed star maps with red dots marking the silent colonies. "It's getting worse," she said without looking up. 12 colonies now. No signals, no responses, nothing. "Pirates?" Jake asked, though he knew it wasn't pirates. Pirates wanted money, not complete silence. "The pattern is wrong for pirates," Commander Rick Barnes said. He had arrived on the bridge wearing his full combat uniform instead of his usual diplomatic clothes. "Pirates hit and run. They don't systematically cut communications." Jake stared at the star map. 12 red dots representing 12 human colonies. Each dot meant thousands of people. Families, children, farmers, miners, teachers, all silent. "Set course for New Geneva," Jake ordered. Best possible speed. New Geneva was the closest silent colony. It had been a farming world with about 40,000 people. They grew food for the other human colonies in the region. Jake had visited there 2 years ago during a diplomatic tour. He remembered children waving at his ship and farmers proud to show off their crops. The journey took 4 days. During that time, 5 more colonies went silent. The pattern was clear now. Something was moving through human space, destroying everything in its path. When the Terra Nova arrived at New Geneva, Jake wished they had come sooner. The planet looked wrong from orbit. Where there should have been cities and farms, there were only dark spots on the surface. "Take us down," Jake ordered. The shuttle landed near what used to be the main settlement. Jake, Lisa, and Rick walked out wearing environmental suits. The air was breathable, but it smelled wrong. It smelled like burned metal and worse things. New Geneva's capital city was gone. Not destroyed like a war zone with broken buildings and rubble. Gone. Melted down to nothing but smooth black glass covering the ground. The only way they knew a city had been there was because of the perfect circle of destruction. "What kind of weapon does this?" Rick asked, scanning the area with his equipment. "Something that generates incredible heat," Lisa answered. She was taking samples of the black glass. "The temperature needed to melt buildings this completely. It's beyond anything we thought possible." They found the first bodies 100 meters from the glass circle. Human bodies, but Jake almost didn't recognize them as such. They had been burned, but not by the same weapon that destroyed the city. These people had been killed slowly. "Captain," Rick called from behind a melted vehicle. "You need to see this." Jake walked over and saw what Rick had found. Words burned into the ground in letters 10 feet tall. The message was in Hydrosian script, but Lisa could read it. "What does it say?" Jake asked. Lisa's voice was quiet when she answered. "It says this is what happens to inferior species. They spent 6 hours searching the ruins of New Geneva. They found evidence of systematic torture, execution, and destruction. The attackers had taken their time. They had made sure every human on the planet suffered before they died. Rick found the communications center, or what was left of it. They didn't just cut communications," he reported. "They broadcast everything. The torture, the executions, all of it. They wanted other human colonies to hear what was happening." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. They visited 3 more dead colonies over the next week. The pattern was always the same. Complete destruction of cities and infrastructure, systematic murder of civilians, broadcast torture sessions, and always the same message burned into the ground in Hydrosian script. By the time they finished investigating, 17 human colonies were confirmed dead. 43,000 people, men, women, children, elderly, all dead, all tortured first. Jake called a meeting of his senior officers. They gathered in the conference room of the Terra Nova. Everyone looked tired and angry. "Orders from Earth?" Rick asked. "Earth wants us to request a meeting with the Galactic Council," Jake replied. "Standard diplomatic protest. File a formal complaint. Ask for mediation." "Mediation?" Rick repeated the word like it was poison. 43,000 people are dead and Earth wants us to file paperwork." "That's what Earth wants," Jake said carefully. "But Earth isn't here." "I am." The room went quiet. Lisa looked up from her reports. Rick stopped cleaning his weapon. The other officers all turned to look at Jake. "What are you saying, Captain?" Lisa asked. Jake stood up and walked to the window that showed the stars outside. "I'm saying that sometimes the people in charge back home don't understand the situation in the field. Sometimes field commanders have to make decisions based on local conditions." "What kind of decisions?" Rick wanted to know. Jake turned back to face his crew. For the first time since they had started this investigation, he smiled. But it wasn't his diplomatic smile. It was something different. Something that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. "The kind of decisions that solve problems permanently," Jake said. "Lisa, I want you to analyze everything we learned about Hydrosian military capabilities. Ships, weapons, tactics, everything. Rick, I want you to review our intelligence files on Hydrosian leadership. Who's in command, where they live, how their government works." "Sir?" Lieutenant Clark said carefully. "Are we talking about military action?" "We're talking about justice," Jake replied. "The Hydrosians wanted to send a message. I think we should send one back." Jake walked to his private safe and entered a code that no one else knew. He pulled out a small device that looked like a standard communication unit, but Lisa knew it wasn't standard. She had never seen anything like it before. "What is that?" she asked. "This is how we talk to the people who really make decisions," Jake said. "Not the diplomats back on Earth. Not the politicians who think they understand how the galaxy works. The people who've been preparing for this day for 50 years. Jake activated the device and spoke a single code word that none of his crew recognized. Then he waited. 3 minutes later, the device buzzed with a reply. Jake listened to the message, then smiled again. The same cold smile. "What did they say?" Rick asked. "They said it's time to take off the gloves," Jake replied. "Time to show the galaxy who humans really are when someone hurts our people." Jake put the device away and looked around the room at his crew. "From this moment on, we're not diplomats anymore. We're something else entirely." Outside the window, the stars looked the same as always. But Jake knew that everything was about to change. The diplomatic meeting took place on Harmony Station, a neutral facility that floated between 3 different star systems. Jake Morrison arrived exactly on time, wearing his best diplomatic uniform and carrying a briefcase full of official papers. He looked like the same polite human representative the galaxy had known for 10 years. Dr. Lisa Harper and Commander Rick Barnes walked beside him through the station's main corridor. Other diplomats and their guards moved around them, preparing for the emergency session. The Hydrosian attack on human colonies had shocked the entire Galactic Council, not because it was brutal, but because it had happened without proper authorization. "Remember," Jake said quietly to his companions, "we're here to seek justice through proper channels. We trust the Council to handle this matter fairly, Lisa nodded. But her eyes were different now, colder. She carried recording, equipment that looked standard but wasn't. Every word spoken in the meeting would be captured and analyzed by systems the other species didn't know existed. The Council chamber was smaller than the main assembly hall, designed for emergency sessions and crisis meetings. Admiral Thexulos was already seated at the Hydrosian table, his tentacles moving in slow patterns that suggested confidence. His aide, a smaller Hydrosian named Kexmar, arranged documents with precise movements. Ambassador Ixtal of the Cathera sat with his usual straight posture, yellow eyes watching everyone in the room. High Singer Vexari of the Zephyrians hovered near her seat, wings creating a soft buzzing sound. Resonance Prime Null of the Nexari stood like a crystal statue, humming in frequencies that made the air vibrate. We appreciate the Council agreeing to this emergency session, Jake said as he took his seat. His voice carried the same humble tone he always used. The Human Republic seeks guidance on this tragic situation. Admiral Thexulos's tentacles wiggled and what humans had learned was amusement. Tragic, yes, but perhaps educational. The galaxy is not a safe place for species that expand beyond their capabilities. Could you explain what you mean? Jake asked, pulling out a tablet to take notes. Your people established colonies in spaces that had been claimed by the Hydrosian Empire for generations. The Admiral replied. When warned to leave, they ignored our communications. The response was proportional to their disrespect. Lisa's recording equipment captured every word, the Admiral's casual tone, his complete lack of remorse, the way he referred to 43,000 murdered humans as a proportional response. I see, Jake said, still writing notes. Could you help us understand the proper protocols for territorial disputes? We want to avoid future misunderstandings. Ambassador Ixtal leaned forward, his scaled face showing something like pity. Humans, your species, thinks the galaxy operates like your homeworld. You believe in laws and fairness and justice, but space is vast and old. The strong take what they want. The weak accept what they are given, or they cease to exist, added High Singer Vexari. Her translated voice carried no emotion. Natural selection operates on a galactic scale. Jake nodded and continued taking notes. So you're saying that might makes right in galactic affairs? Exactly, Admiral Thexulos confirmed. Your colonies were weak. They had no significant defenses. They produced nothing of military value. They existed only because we allowed them to exist. And when they forgot their place, Ambassador Ixtal added, they were reminded in the traditional manner. Jake looked up from his notes. Traditional manner? Public execution, the Admiral explained, made visible to other potential violators. Your people needed to understand the consequences of territorial disrespect. Lisa's hands tightened on her recording device. Rick's breathing had become very controlled, the way it got when he was fighting not to reach for his weapon. The broadcasts of the executions were educational tools? Jake asked. Precisely. Other human colonies received the message clearly. They have withdrawn from disputed territories without further encouragement. Jake wrote this down too. Every casual admission of mass murder, every proud explanation of systematic torture, every detail about how they had enjoyed making human children watch their parents die. We appreciate your patience in explaining galactic customs to us, Jake said. The Human Republic recognizes that we are newcomers here. We don't want to cause trouble. Wise, said Resonance Prime Null. The crystal being's voice came from speakers, since it communicated through vibrations. Acceptance of inferior position ensures survival. Could you provide documentation of the territorial claims involved? Jake asked. We want to make sure our remaining colonies don't accidentally violate any other boundaries. Admiral Thexulos gestured to his aide, who produced a data pad. These charts show all current Hydrosian territorial claims. As you can see, they encompass most of what you call the Kepler sector. Jake accepted the data pad and studied the charts. The Hydrosian claims covered not just the 17 destroyed colonies, but 43 other human settlements, nearly 200,000 people. This is very helpful, Jake said. Should we evacuate all human presence from these areas immediately? That would be prudent, the Admiral agreed. Unless, of course, humanity wishes to negotiate for continued presence. What would such negotiations involve? Tribute, military service, recognition of Hydrosian supremacy, The usual terms for vassal species. Jake nodded as if this made perfect sense. I'll need to consult with Earth about these terms. In the meantime, would it be possible to arrange safe passage for civilian evacuations?
For a fee, Ambassador Ixtal said.
Protection services are not free. Of course not, Jake agreed. What fee would be appropriate? The aliens spent the next hour explaining their fee structure. Ships, cargo, people, everything had a price. They discussed the value of human lives with the same tone they might use to negotiate shipping rates. Lisa recorded it all. Rick memorized every detail. Jake took careful notes and asked polite questions. When the meeting ended, Jake stood and shook tentacles with Admiral Thexulos. He thanked everyone for their time and patience. He promised to take their advice back to Earth and return with proper responses. You are learning, human, the Admiral said as they parted. Perhaps your species will survive after all. We certainly hope so, Jake replied with his biggest smile. The three humans walked back to their ship in silence. Other diplomats passed them in the corridors, some nodding politely, others ignoring them completely. Just another day in galactic politics. Only when they were safely aboard the Terra Nova did anyone speak. They're proud of it, Lisa said. Her voice was barely controlled. They enjoyed explaining how they tortured our people. They think we're going to pay them for the privilege of being their slaves, Rick added. His hand was on his weapon now, though still not drawing it. Jake went to his private office and activated the same communication device he had used before. This time he transmitted everything. The recordings, the territorial charts, the tribute demands, every detail of the meeting. The response came back in less than a minute. A single word that made Jake's smile return. Approved. Jake walked back to where his crew was waiting. The cold expression was back in his eyes, and this time it wasn't hidden. What did they say? Lisa asked. They said it's time to stop pretending, Jake replied. Time to show the galaxy what humans really do to species that hurt our children. He looked out the window at Harmony Station, where the alien diplomats were probably celebrating their successful intimidation of humanity. How long do they have? Rick asked. Jake checked his watch. About 72 hours. That's how long it takes for polite humans to become something else entirely. Outside, the station looked peaceful and safe, just like the human colonies had looked before the Hydrosians arrived. Jake wondered if the aliens would find the irony amusing. 3 months passed after the diplomatic meeting on Harmony Station. The galaxy settled back into its normal routine. Trade ships moved between star systems. Diplomats filed reports and attended ceremonies. The Hydrosian Empire expanded its territorial claims without opposition. Admiral Thexulos commanded the Third Fleet from his flagship, a massive vessel called the Deep Current. 2 million Hydrosian military personnel served under his command, spread across 400 ships. It was the largest single fleet in Hydrosian space, designed to intimidate any species that might challenge their authority. The Admiral was reviewing reports from the human territories when his communications officer made an announcement that changed everything. Sir, we've lost contact with the 7th Battle Group. Admiral Thexulos looked up from his work. The 7th Battle Group consisted of 20 ships patrolling the border with Cathara space. Equipment failure? Unknown, sir. They were reporting normal status at 800 hours. At 0815, all signals stopped. The Admiral's tentacles moved in patterns of mild concern. Equipment failures happened, even with military-grade systems. Send the 12th Squadron to investigate. Already dispatched, sir. They should reach the last known position in 6 hours. But 6 hours later, the 12th Squadron was also silent. 20 more ships, gone without a distress signal or emergency beacon. Admiral Thexulos called an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The conference room aboard the Deep Current filled with Hydrosian officers, their tentacles moving in rapid patterns that showed increasing anxiety. Cathara attack? Suggested Fleet Commander Raxilon. Impossible, replied Intelligence Chief Vestara. Our sensors show no Cathara fleet movements. Their ships are all in normal positions. Nexari weapons test? The Nexari don't test weapons in our space without permission. Admiral Thexulos studied the tactical displays. 40 ships and their crews vanished without explanation, in normal space near friendly territories, during routine patrols. Sir, the communications officer announced, we've just lost contact with the 15th Battle Group. Now the Admiral's tentacles showed real alarm. The 15th was stationed near the core Hydrosian worlds, far from any potential enemies. 60 more ships gone. Order all remaining units to return to main fleet positions immediately, the Admiral commanded. Cancel all patrol missions. Set defensive formation around the homeworlds. But the orders came too late. Over the next 12 hours, Admiral Thexulos watched his entire fleet disappear piece by piece. Battle groups, patrol squadrons, single ships on courier missions, all gone. All silent. The Admiral sent desperate messages to Hydrosian High Command. He requested reinforcements from other fleets. He demanded explanations from allied species. He activated every emergency protocol in the military handbook. Nothing helped. By the end of the second day, only the Admiral's flagship remained. The Deep Current floated alone in space, surrounded by empty vacuum where the Third Fleet had once been. "Sir," his communications officer said with a voice that shook. "Incoming transmission from the Galactic Council. Emergency session called." Admiral Thexulos arrived at the council chambers to find chaos. Representatives from every major species were talking at once, their voices creating a wall of noise that made translation impossible. "Order," called the council president, banging his gavel with two of his forearms. "We will address this crisis systematically." Ambassador Ixtal of the Cathara was the first to speak. "The Hydrosian Empire accuses us of destroying their Third Fleet. We categorically deny any involvement." "Our people did not attack Hydrosian forces," confirmed High Singer Vexari of the Zephyrians. "We have no conflict with their empire." Resonance Prime Null hummed in patterns that translated as confusion and denial. The Nexari had not been involved either. Admiral Thexulos stood to address the council. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. 400 ships. 2 million personnel. Gone in 48 hours. Someone must be responsible. "Perhaps your own incompetence," suggested Ambassador Ixtal. "The Cathara have always questioned Hydrosian military efficiency." This was not incompetence. The Admiral's voice rose to a pitch that made his translator squeal. This was coordinated attack by unknown enemy using unknown technology. Unknown enemy? The council president looked puzzled. What enemy could destroy an entire fleet without being detected? "That's what I want to know," Admiral Thexulos demanded. "Where are your intelligence services? Where are your sensor networks? How does a military force large enough to eliminate 400 ships move through council space without being seen?" The other representatives exchanged glances. The Admiral was right. No known species had the capability to destroy the Hydrosian Third Fleet so quickly and completely. The technology required would be beyond anything currently possessed by council members. "Perhaps," said a quiet voice from the back of the chamber, "you should ask the humans." Everyone turned to look at Jake Morrison, who had been sitting silently at his small table near the rear of the room. He looked the same as always. Polite, humble, slightly apologetic for taking up space. Admiral Thexulos's tentacles writhed with anger. Humans? The weaklings who beg for safe passage and offer medical supplies? What could they possibly know about military operations? "Maybe nothing," Jake replied with his usual diplomatic smile. "But we do keep records of everything that happens in our space. Dr. Harper has been analyzing the data from the past few days." Lisa Harper stood up, carrying her ever-present tablet. "We detected some unusual energy signatures in the region where your ships disappeared, Admiral. The patterns are very distinctive." "What patterns?" the Admiral demanded. Lisa activated a holographic display that showed the tactical situation over the past 3 days. Red dots marked the positions where Hydrosian ships had vanished. Blue lines showed the timeline of disappearances. The attacks followed a precise sequence, Lisa explained. Each group was eliminated in order of military importance. Command ships first, then heavy cruisers, then support vessels. It shows detailed knowledge of Hydrosian fleet organization. Admiral Thexulos stared at the display. Lisa was right. The pattern showed someone who understood Hydrosian military doctrine better than most Hydrosians did. Furthermore, Lisa continued, the energy signatures match weapons technology that we've never seen before. Very advanced, very precise, designed to leave no survivors and no evidence. Whose technology? Ambassador Ixtal wanted to know. Lisa looked at Jake, who nodded permission. According to our analysis, the technology is human in origin. The council chamber exploded into noise. Every representative started talking at once. Admiral Thexilos's tentacles thrashed in patterns of disbelief and rage. "Impossible," he shouted over the chaos. "Humans don't have military technology. You barely have defensive capabilities." "That's what we wanted you to think," Jake said quietly, but somehow his voice carried over all the noise in the room. The chamber fell silent. Every alien eye, tentacle, and sensor array focused on the small human delegation. Jake Morrison stood up slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was different. The humble, apologetic tone was gone. In its place was something cold and precise. "For 50 years, you've dismissed us as weak and harmless. You've demanded tribute, insulted our diplomats, and ignored our protests. You believed we would never fight back because we seemed incapable of fighting." He walked to the center of the chamber, where holographic displays showed the positions of every major fleet in the galaxy. 3 months ago, the Hydrosian Empire murdered 43,000 human civilians. You tortured our children and broadcast their deaths as entertainment. You did this because you believed we were too weak to respond. The displays changed, showing new information that made every representative in the room freeze with shock. Human ships appeared on the tactical maps. Not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. In every system, around every major world, weapons platforms that had been invisible suddenly became visible. "You were wrong about us," Jake continued. "We're not weak. We're patient. We don't fight when diplomacy fails. We only use diplomacy until we're ready to win." Admiral Thexulos stared at the displays showing human military assets throughout his home system, ships that had been there for years, hidden and waiting. "This is impossible," he whispered. "We would have detected you." "You detected exactly what we wanted you to detect," Commander Rick Barnes said, speaking for the first time since entering the chamber. "While you were laughing at our weak diplomats, our real people were learning everything about you." "Every trade mission was a reconnaissance operation," Lisa added. "Every cultural exchange was an intelligence-gathering mission. Every time you insulted us, we learned something new about how to destroy you." Jake Morrison looked directly at Admiral Thexulos. "Your third fleet wasn't destroyed by an unknown enemy, Admiral. It was destroyed by the same species you thought was too weak to matter. We eliminated 2 million of your people in less than 48 hours, just like you eliminated 43,000 of ours. But we left you alive," Jake continued, "so you could deliver a message to the rest of the galaxy. The message is simple: humans remember everything, and humans always pay their debts." The council chamber remained silent as the full weight of the revelation. The silence in the council chamber stretched for nearly a full minute. Representatives from across the galaxy stared at the holographic displays showing human military assets in every major system. Ships that had been invisible for decades, weapons platforms disguised as civilian installations, surveillance networks that reached into the heart of every alien civilization. Ambassador Ixtal was the first to find his voice. "This is a declaration of war against the entire Galactic Council." "No," Jake Morrison replied calmly. "This is a declaration of capability. War is what happens when you force us to use it." High Singer Vexari's wings buzzed in rapid patterns of agitation. How long have you been preparing this deception?" "Since the day we joined the Council," Dr. Lisa Harper answered. "Every human you've ever met in Council space has been part of the intelligence operation. Every diplomat, every traitor, every civilian. We've been studying you for 50 years." Admiral Thexulos, the sole survivor of his mighty fleet, looked at the displays with something approaching admiration. "The Third Fleet never had a chance, did it?" "Not from the moment you decided to torture human children," Commander Rick Barnes replied. "That was when you went from being potential threats to confirmed targets." "But we followed galactic law," the Admiral protested. "Territorial disputes are resolved through strength. The strong survive, the weak perish. You said you understood this principle." Jake Morrison's expression didn't change. "We understood it perfectly. You declared that might makes right in the galaxy. You demonstrated that the strong can do whatever they want to the weak. You taught us that mercy is considered weakness and that civilized behavior is seen as an invitation to attack." He gestured to the holographic displays. "So we became stronger than you. All of you." Resonance prime null hummed in frequencies that conveyed deep confusion. The translated voice asked, "But your diplomatic behavior, your requests for guidance, your acceptance of inferior status, was all of this deception?" "All of it," Lisa confirmed. "Every smile, every apology, every humble request for permission. We needed you to believe we were harmless while we learned how to destroy you. The tribute payments, Ambassador Ixtal said, understanding beginning to dawn in his yellow eyes. The protection fees, the safe passage charges, you were paying us to reveal your own capabilities. Exactly. Every payment was a test of your response patterns. Every fee taught us more about your resource allocation systems. Every protection charge showed us the gaps in your defensive networks. Jake Morrison walked to the main display console and activated additional screens. The new images showed the current status of every major alien military installation. Kythera Home Fleet, he announced, currently surrounded by human vessels that have been in position for 3 years. Your weapons are targeted. Your shields are compromised. Your communication systems are monitored. Ambassador Ixtal's scales shifted to a pale green color that indicated fear. Zephyrian carrier groups, Jake continued, tracked by human hunter-killer squadrons. Your ship movements have been predicted and countered before you even issue the orders. High Singer Vexari's buzzing became erratic. Nexari Crystal Gardens, Jake said, referring to the Nexari species' mobile cities, infiltrated by human operatives who have been living among you for 20 years. Every conversation is recorded. Every decision is known before you make it. Resonance Prime Null's humming stopped entirely. But the Hydrosian Empire, Jake said, looking directly at Admiral Thexulos, received special attention. When you murdered our civilians, you activated protocols that had been in place since our 2nd year in the Council. Your entire military infrastructure has been systematically dismantled. New displays showed the scope of human operations against the Hydrosians. Not just the 3rd Fleet, but every fleet, every shipyard, every training facility, every command center. Gone. All of it. Your species still exists, Jake continued. Your civilian population is unharmed, but your ability to project military power has been permanently eliminated. You are now what humans used to be, a species dependent on the goodwill of others for protection. Admiral Thexulos's tentacles drooped. His empire's military might, built over centuries, had been erased in less than a week. What do you want? The council president asked. His forearms were trembling. What are humanity's demands? We want what we've always wanted, Jake replied. Safe passage for our ships. Protection for our civilians. The right to exist without interference. But now, Rick Barnes added, we're not asking for these things. We're informing you that we will have them. The Galactic Council can continue to operate, Lisa explained. Trade can continue. Diplomatic relations can continue. But the balance of power has changed. Permanently, Jake Morrison returned to his seat at the small table marked Human Republic, but somehow the table didn't look small. Anymore, the rules are simple, he said. Any species that threatens human civilians will cease to exist as a military power. Any government that attacks human colonies will find itself without the infrastructure to govern. Any individual who harms human children will discover that we have very long memories and very patient methods of collecting debts. This is tyranny, Ambassador Ixtal protested. You're establishing human dominance through fear. No, Jake corrected. We're establishing human security through superior capability. The difference is important. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We just want to make sure the galaxy understands what happens when someone tries to rule us. And if we refuse to accept this new arrangement? High Singer Vexari demanded. Rick Barnes smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was not a pleasant expression. Then you'll discover what happened to the Hydrosian military was just a demonstration. A very gentle demonstration. The council president looked around the chamber at the representatives of dozens of species. All of them had built their power on the assumption that humans were weak and naive. All of them now realized how wrong they had been. What guarantee do we have that humanity won't use its superior position to dominate other species? The president asked. The same guarantee you gave us, Jake replied. None whatsoever. You'll have to trust us to be benevolent rulers just like we had to trust you. But unlike you, Lisa added, we actually are benevolent. We don't want to conquer anyone. We don't want to exterminate anyone. We just want to live in peace. And if someone won't let us live in peace, Rick finished, then we'll make sure they can't stop us. Jake Morrison stood up and gathered his diplomatic papers, just like he had after hundreds of other council meetings. This session has been very educational. We appreciate the council's time and attention. He walked toward the exit, followed by Lisa and Rick. At the door he paused and looked back at the assembly of alien representatives. "Oh, and one more thing," he said with his familiar diplomatic smile. "The next council meeting is scheduled for next month. We look forward to attending. We have some proposals for improving galactic trade security that we think everyone will find very reasonable." After the humans left, the council chamber remained silent for a long time. Finally, Ambassador Ixtal spoke what everyone was thinking. "They were never the prey," he said quietly. "We were." Outside the station, the Terra Nova undocked and began its journey back to human space. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair, looking out at the stars. They looked the same as always, but everything had changed. "Sir," Lieutenant Ben Clark asked from his position at communications, "what do we do now?" "Now?" Jake replied, his diplomatic smile returning. "Now we go back to being polite, friendly humans who just want to get along with everyone." "But with a difference," Lisa added from her station. "What difference?" The lieutenant wanted to know. Rick Barnes answered from his position near the weapons console. "Now when we're polite, people know it's because we choose to be, not because we have to be." Jake Morrison nodded. "The galaxy wanted to teach us about power. Consider the lesson learned. Now it's time for us to teach them about the difference between force and strength." "What's the difference?" Lieutenant Clark asked. Jake looked out at the stars and thought about 43,000 human civilians who would never see their families again. Then he thought about 2 million Hydrosian military personnel who had learned too late what humans do to protect their children. "Force is what you use when you're weak," he said finally. "Strength is what you have when you don't need to use it." The Terra Nova jumped to hyperspace, leaving the council station behind. Throughout the galaxy, alien civilizations were making emergency calls to their military commanders, trying to understand how they had so completely misunderstood humanity. But Jake Morrison wasn't worried about what they might discover. After 50 years of preparation, humans were ready for whatever came next. The mask had finally fallen, and the galaxy was about to learn what humans looked like when they stopped pretending to be harmless.